welcome to the Non-Diet Yogi podcast. This is episode 18, Healing from Hypothalamic Amenorrhea with Phoebe Jobson. Each month, I invite you to dive deep with me to explore and dismantle the world of big wellness, where spirituality, fitness, diet culture, and white supremacy collide in a strange world where orthorexia parades as fitspiration and COVID denialism is just what cool celebrity paleo chefs do. I'm referring, of course, to Pete Evans, FYI. I'm your host, Casey Conroy, non-diet dietitian, naturopath in training, and yoga teacher. And this episode has been a long time coming. As with my guest Phoebe, hypothalamic amenorrhea is a huge passion of mine, having experienced it over the course of my eating disorder back in my early to mid-20s. And my personal story with hypothalamic amenorrhea, or HA, is something that I shared with my Patreon subscribers a few episodes back, so it is still there for those interested. I could have spoken with Phoebe for hours, and my excitable soul really needed some serious reining in for this episode. However, we did manage to cover a lot in an hour. In this episode, we discuss not only missing periods, why they happen and what to do about them, but irregular periods, also known as oligomenorrhea. And this is something that I believe is a real blind spot in the treatment of things like infertility and disordered eating. So that's exciting. Also, we talk about anovulatory periods just briefly. This is something that I didn't know for the longest time, but people with uteruses can have a bleed. You can actually menstruate without ovulating. So just because you might be having an actual bleed, that doesn't mean that you're fertile as such. It doesn't mean you're ovulating. And I've had quite a few clients who have been perhaps having periods for years, but have been having anovulatory cycles. Anyway, I'm already getting ahead of myself. So some of the other stuff we talk about are, some signs and symptoms that accompany HA and some of the issues that come along with that. We talk all about the food piece, so how much, how often, and whether calorie counting to ensure minimum intakes helps or hinders. Hint, it depends. Why potatoes are not the devil and carbs may actually be your secret weapon. We discuss some guidelines on exercise or movement in HA recovery, why rest rocks, the importance of seeing a psychologist or psychotherapist or counsellor as part of your recovery team, tips on dealing with diet mentality and diet culture, busting some common HA myths. This was a really fun part. Partial versus full recovery. The problem also with skipping the nutritional rehabilitation part of HA recovery. So for example, just going to the naturopath or your Chinese medicine practitioner and getting some herbs to try to kickstart your period, or just jumping straight to fertility medications or injectables in the case of, going to a GP or fertility specialist. So the problem with doing this instead of doing the nutritional rehabilitation stuff. So that bit comes towards the end. Just adding on a little bit here and that, it's far less likely to work when you haven't done that nutritional rehabilitation. And also, any concurrent eating disorders are not obviously going to improve if we skip that piece. So there's so much crammed into this episode. There's more than what I've mentioned. So we'll get into it in a second. I just want to say one thing, and that is apologies for my microphone and my audio in this interview. Phoebe's audio is just fine, but my audio was a bit average. I did the inbuilt microphone trick again, like I did in episode 16. I forgot to use my fancy pants microphone, or somehow didn't do that. So, definitely not an audio technician by any stretch of the imagination, but I am slowly learning from my mistakes doing this whole podcast thing, and I'm trying not to be too type A about it. Just a trigger warning that there is talk of calories around minute 30. up until minute 36 of this podcast. So just a heads up for that. If you know that you will be healthier and mentally happier, etc., by not listening to that stuff, then please, it's around minute 30 up to minute 36. I'm going to give you a little bit more information about Phoebe because she is really impressive. So here is her bio. Phoebe Jobson is a Sydney-based speaker and naturopath at Nutmeg Naturopathy. How cool is that name? Naturopathy encompasses a number of modalities, particularly herbal medicine and nutrition, to support acute and chronic illnesses and imbalances within the body. Having had her own health challenges in the past and being diagnosed with a restrictive eating disorder, Phoebe knows what it's like to be in a place of diseased health. She has learnt how nutrition, herbal medicine, and other holistic principles have the power to help and enable our body and mind to thrive. Phoebe is so passionate about supporting individuals and helping them take care of their precious health. We must learn to appreciate and love who we are, nourishing ourselves on a daily basis. Helping others add health, happiness, and soul back into their lives truly makes Phoebe's heart sing. Each and every one of us is on a different health journey, and Phoebe is here to help support, build, and energize that journey. The very last thing I want to mention before we dive in, if you love the podcast, please subscribe and leave a rating and review on Apple iTunes. To do so is dead easy. From the show page, you just scroll down until you see the rating and review section with the stars. And for even more good stuff, you can become a Patreon of the podcast for $2 a month and receive non-diet yogi bonuses in addition to the podcast. Patreons can access a growing library of goodies, including offers, PDF guidebooks, audios, meditations, herbal giveaways, and guest offerings. For this episode, Phoebe has generously offered a 25% off voucher for her online or in-person consultations for all non-diet yogi Patreon subscribers, and that is good until the 31st of January 2021. Okay, so here is my conversation with Phoebe. Hello, Phoebe, and welcome to the podcast. It is amazing to have you here.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here. I've been super excited all week.
Yay! As I just said before I pressed the record button, I've been waiting for this conversation probably since the podcast started. I've been wanting to find someone who is a naturopath, who is anti-diet, and who is into working with people with hypothalamic amenorrhea. So I know I'm getting ahead of myself already, but you are that person. I'm so excited and stoked. So yeah, doubly thank you very much for being here.
Yay!
I'm so appreciative.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, so Phoebe, I've already given a little bit away about you, that you're a naturopath and you're anti-diet. I'm wondering if you could introduce yourself to the listeners and maybe give us a bit of a story or background about how you came to be a non-diet naturopath.
Yeah. So yes, hello everybody. My name is Phoebe Jobson and I'm a naturopath. And I suppose if I go way back, I graduated from high school and I went straight into university and I studied and completed my BA majoring in psychology. And then I had some time off. I went traveling when we could all travel, which was amazing. And I always kind of had an itch for the natural health industry, which was a true passion and lifestyle of mine. So then I enrolled at my nature care college in Sydney and have never looked back, basically. And I suppose that the non-diet part comes in because I have had my own food and body image challenges in the past. It would have been for the majority of my life. And I was diagnosed with a restrictive eating disorder. So I kind of get that, I know what it's like to be in a place of mental and physical ill health. And I'm so passionate about supporting individuals and helping them take care of their precious health. And a big part of that for me, and it would have been because of my experiences, I know, is promoting and also following myself. I definitely much practice what I preach, is not being on any kind of diet. and or any particular way of eating. You know, I eat all foods. I simply live by the motto, which is kind of my life motto, all in moderation, you know, when it comes to everything, especially food and exercise. And that's kind of a lot of what I educate my patients on. And from my experiences with my restrictive eating disorder, that's just what's made me so passionate about it. And educating men as well, but especially educating women about, you know, kind of helping them have healthy relationships with food and educating them on food and how amazing it is and how we need it every single day and a wide variety of it, and helping them nourish themselves through not just food. Nourishment includes every single thing we do every single day. But yeah, I think that was my journey. And my BA in psychology, I'm really interested in psychology as well. So that kind of helped, but it was mainly my past experiences, and I'm very passionate about it. And yeah, I'm strongly a non-diet practitioner.
Yeah, I love your passion for this stuff. Like, it's so tangible. Anyone who doesn't follow Phoebe on Instagram, please do, because your posts are incredible, Phoebe, and your passion it just jumps off the screen kind of thing. And I go through your stuff and I'm like, yeah, this chick really, she knows what she's talking about, and she really, really wants to help people. So yeah, thank you for the incredible work you do. And just touching on your lived experience with a restrictive eating disorder, is that what brought you to working not just with individuals with food and body image issues, but also in particular with HA? And if so, could you tell us a bit about your journey specifically with HA?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And when I was at one of my lowest points with my restrictive eating disorder, I had HA, so hypothalamic amenorrhea. So I'd lost my period. It was probably for about 2 years. And on top of that, which I didn't realize at the time, but my period kicked in really late. I was nearly finished year 12, so almost 18 years old. So it was also, looking back, I would have had primary HA as well. So it took a lot. All my friends had their periods, and I had no idea why I didn't have my period. And I don't know, I think the universe also has a way of sending me those beautiful patients as well who are struggling with HA, because I started seeing them before I really started talking about it on, you know, my website and social media and everything. I had already started seeing a few HA patients, and they just really lit a fire within me. And because I have been through that, I get it. And with what I've studied, but also personal experiences, I really empathize with them, and I really think I can help them, and I can hear what they're not telling me, you know, because they don't need to say much, and I get it. So yeah, I think that's why.
You've been in those shoes before. Yes. So Phoebe, could you tell us, for those listening who don't know what hypothalamic amenorrhea is, could you tell us what it is and maybe some signs and symptoms that accompany it and some of the issues that come along with that?
Yes. So put in very simple terms, HA stands for hypothalamic amenorrhea. So it's absence of your period, they say roughly for 6 months. And it's when there's no medical diagnosis. So there's no other reason for your loss of period. So, you know, if there's testing that needs to be done, or they've seen their GP, sometimes even coming off the pill, girls can not have their periods kick in. It can be even up to 9 months or so, or even a period of stress or trauma. So if all that aside, if that's all been ruled out as to why a girl's period has stopped, then the very common underlying reason as to why a woman has stopped menstruating is from under-eating, over-exercise, and that duo having a consequent massive stress on their body. And if women, it's a super intelligent thing from the body. It's super smart. So as women, if we're not providing our bodies with enough beautiful nutrients and food and a wide variety of them every single day, our body and our mind, the same thing, they cannot thrive. So our hypothalamus, which is a part of our brain, plays a massive role in our hormonal health, super intelligently decides that our body needs to stop ovulating because it's a protective mechanism. Our hypothalamus knows that our body's not thriving enough to be able to hold a child and raise a child. So HA is a super smart signal, and it's kind of your body screaming out for love and help and support. So yeah, that's kind of in a nutshell what HA is.
Yeah.
And symptoms, I suppose, and issues that come along with that, like a big one would be infertility. So if we don't have our periods and we're not ovulating as women, resulting infertility for that period of time, potentially can even, if it really affects hormones and estrogen, can kind of affect it long term. And also another big one is bone health. So because of the resulting loss of estrogen, that can really affect bone health as well. So women with severe HA, especially because of some type of eating disorder, they're often concerned about developing osteoporosis and loss of bone mass and things like that. And then if it's due to that under eating and exercising, there can be a stack of associated symptoms at the time. So when I was going through it, kind of every little system and cell isn't functioning properly because you're not eating enough. So I was often bloated. My digestive system was totally off. My bowel movements were all over the place. I was often headachy, fatigued, skin issues, heightened anxiety. I was anemic, so really low in iron, and probably had a number of other nutritional deficiencies as well. And yeah, the list goes on. So there's all those kind of stuff that can be short term. They kind of come along with that picture of having HA and not eating enough, over exercising.
Yeah.
I think that answers your question.
Yeah, that was a beautiful answer. Thank you so much, and a really easy to understand answer as well.
Cool.
As you were listing some of those symptoms that you personally experienced when you had HA, I kind of got thinking like, wow, there's a lot of women who come to see me because I see a lot of women with HA, but also the initial reason many individuals come to see me, and possibly you as well, I don't want to speak for you, but maybe, is because they've got this kind of nebulous cloud of all these seemingly not that related issues. And especially if they're seeking a naturopath or, I call myself a holistic dietitian, holistic nutritionist, the people who I seem to attract are people who are already on I've got these issues because I've got candida train, or I've got these issues because I've got a food intolerance. When what you're saying is actually a very common reason is this restriction of food, coupled possibly with the overexercise, but the restriction of food. I'm just wondering if you have that experience, and if so, yeah, kind of how you present, the possibility of under eating being the main issue, actually.
It's a very sensitive topic, as you know. And I mean, the initial is all about, them telling me everything that's going on. It's a big, initial health consultation. I'll ask them 1,000 questions about every different aspect of their life and system functioning and everything. So we do cover a lot. So I will always go through everything: gut health, skin health, what they're eating in a day, past history. So it'll often somehow come out or I'll just, with their diet, I can kind of just semi-know, like I'm sure you can as well, just if it's a very restrictive diet, or they know exactly how much they weigh or exactly what's in a day, there's kind of some signs and symptoms. And then I often will even address it. I need to address it as soon as possible. So in the initial consultation, and it's just around having a very open and making sure they feel safe in my space, but just an open conversation about their relationship with food. I'll kind of just, if I suspect that whatever they've come to see me for, it could be skin health, could be gut health, whatever it is, could be sleep. Just a sensitive conversation around how they feel their relationship is with food, and do they feel that that ever creates an issue for them, and it'll often come out, and then we kind of go from there. And it depends on how severe they are. I'm a massive advocate of seeing a psychologist. I think that would be number one. So whether it's in that initial consult and the person's open to it, some of them don't want to see anyone but myself. So that's kind of developing that relationship first and having however many sessions and hopefully getting a few other practitioners in their corner to help support them. But yeah, it's just kind of creating a nice space for them to feel comfortable to have that conversation.
Yeah, that's really important, isn't it? Creating that space, creating that safety and that trust.
Yeah.
With your client. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the other thing I was thinking, sorry, I know I'm going off on a slight tangent here, but
no, go for it.
The other thing I was thinking was that, especially with the gut issues that you spoke about when we're in a relative energy deficiency and we're not eating enough, that gut issues happen, and so often, and it makes so much sense for people to think, well, maybe it's something I'm eating rather than it's all the stuff I'm not eating enough.
Not eating, yeah.
So it makes a lot of sense for people to think I have a food intolerance, or even they may actually have a food intolerance, whether it was pre-existing and is now worsened because their gut function's not as good, or it has been triggered by the lowered gut functionality that's a result of the disordered restrictive eating. So it can all get really mixed up. So that conversation
totally
that's so important.
Yeah, and sometimes they're not ready to hear it or say it, which is okay as well.
Yeah.
It's just kind of planting that seed, and I want them feeling better. So if they come in for gut health, I want to help I want them feeling better, but it would be how I would probably treat HA girls, getting them to eat more, educating them around food, digestive system.
Yeah.
So whether they can, whether they're open to talking about it or they acknowledge that there is an eating disorder somewhere, I would work with them in a way that would be adding more nourishment to their day and nutrients to their day anyway.
So you've kind of started going into my very next question, which is, what is the solution? If what we have is hypothalamic amenorrhea, that's the reason our periods have disappeared, what then?
There are so many things that can help. And again, it's also, I'm going to be focusing on if there is an eating disorder involved as well, because they can have just HA without the eating disorder.
Yeah.
Period of stress, post-pill, could be thyroid related. So if there is an eating disorder or restrictive eating or whatever it might be involved, and that does tend to be what I see. Like when HA walks into my office, it tends to be linked up with an eating disorder. So there's so much that can help, and I truly believe that being well is being mentally and physically well. You can't just work on mental health or physical health. They come hand in hand. So first thing, I said it before, but I think it is imperative when an eating disorder is involved that the patient seeks psychological support. That's like utmost importance for me. So I would always have this conversation if they're not already seeing a psychologist. If they're already seeing a psych, then fantastic. That's so heartwarming. But finding a psychologist that they like and that they can really work with, that to me, that is vital. So then for me as a practitioner, that can kind of put me at ease slightly, because I know, amazing, they're seeing this psychologist once a week or wherever they're up to, once a fortnight, whatever, twice a week, whatever it is. And so then I can come in and do what I do. So that would be, I'm working on balance, especially with food and exercise, but a balance of all things: rest, enjoyment, work, sunshine, sleep, holidays, food and exercise, balance of all things. But particularly with food and exercise, that's where that balance is really important for our HA, ED, eating disorder, disordered eating type girls. And I very much promote all in moderation. So when it comes to eating, all in moderation, whether it's, I often talk about 80-20, 80% of the time-ish, we're nourishing ourselves through, nutrient dense whole foods. And then that 20-ish% of the time, it's birthdays, it's Christmas, it's your Friday night dinner out, it's a Saturday, it's whatever it is. And that's really important too. So eating foods that aren't necessarily super nutrient dense, but they're delicious and they're part of a balanced diet. And also I talk a lot about volume, variety and regularity when it comes to eating. That's actually something my psychologist and I worked on years ago, and it's kind of stuck with me. So VVR, so making sure there's volume, so eating enough every single day. And a lot of what I do with my patients is making sure that's at least breakfast, lunch and dinner, and at least 2 snacks, so roughly eating every 3 to 4 hours. And then a lot of education on getting variety, so we're not just eating the exact same things every day, because then we'd just be limited to whatever we're getting nutrient wise from those foods. And regularity, so that breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks every single day. And a lot of education around our macronutrients with every meal, so particularly protein, our omega-3 fatty acids, so our essential fatty acids, we need them for basically every aspect of health. And our complex carbohydrates and our starchy veggies are super important, especially to get our periods back as well. And I would never count calories, anything like that. And I really steer away from that because that can be very triggering. And sometimes, depending on the patient, we'll use very rough measurements, but it's mainly to make sure they're eating enough. So to say, I want at least X amount of tablespoons or cups or whatever of this. And rest days, super important. So working with food, but also then looking at their exercise and encouraging rest days and reducing intensity of exercise as well.
Okay, folks, so just jumping in here to let you know that coming up right around the corner is talk about calories and numbers mentioned. So as I mentioned at the start, it starts around minute 30. It's actually a little bit before, which is why I'm jumping in here, just to protect the well-being of those who do not need to hear about numbers and that kind of stuff right now. So if that is you, please feel free to fast forward to about the 34-minute mark. Otherwise, go ahead and listen. Thanks.
Oh, there's so much there, isn't there? Oh my God.
So much. And obviously I don't do all of that at once. That's, it's baby steps. Yeah.
What really jumped out at me as you were speaking was how you emphasize the volume. I mean, there was the variety and the regularity, which is super crucial, super important, but the volume, so the adequacy of, are we eating enough? Because you could be eating regular meals and snacks, and I have clients who do this. I eat breakfast, lunch and dinner. I even have snacks. I even have dessert. I have heaps of variety. But it's like, how much are you eating though? Oh, tiny little portions. I portion control. I'm sticking to, making sure I don't go over, 1,200, 1,500, 1,800, even 2,000 calories a day. So just really, I think that volume, that adequacy component is really important, and possibly, this is just from my own experience with my clients, is one of the trickier ones to get is that adequacy, that volume in. I'm just wondering with that, so you already mentioned, you give kind of at least have, this many cups, or you give minimum. I know you said you don't count calories, but do you ever, like, even just in your own mind, have a minimum caloric intake for clients recovering from HA? Or is it more just all the other stuff that you've spoken about and just without counting?
Yes. The girls that I tend to get are kind of in a phase where they're not, it's not as if they need to go to hospital. So they're not in this severe state of major caloric deprivation. So I'm often at a stage where often they come to see me because their periods still haven't kicked back in yet, but they are slowly starting to gain weight. So it is this fine line of, I definitely don't want to speak calories with them. So measurements are kind of I feel less triggering. Some patients, I'm really happy with their how much they're having. So I don't tend to, but I kind of know in my head how much I want to see them hitting. And it depends on the person in terms of calories. So they might need way plus 2,000, or not. It totally depends. And then it depends on what they're doing with their exercise. If they're in a phase of complete rest, if they're working it with their psychologist. So it does depend.
Yeah.
And another thing I try get them to do, which it depends on the person, but if they have a person in their close circle, friends or family, someone they work with, that they acknowledge has a really healthy relationship with food, and they see them eating like in inverted commas, normal plate of food, to kind of start having some really positive people in their circle that they can see how much is on their plate of food, to kind of, steer away from that counting and just be like, say their best friend has a really healthy relationship with food. Are they eating that? Yes, they are. Okay. Did they add, how big is their portion if they're going out with dinner with them? That's kind of a nice way to also, and obviously everyone's different. So that's, it's not necessarily the most perfect comparison, but that can help someone, instead of comparing themselves to potentially someone else who is disordered, finding healthy, people with healthy relationships with food and comparing portion sizes.
Yeah, that's really got me thinking, because you're right, it is such an individual thing. I mean, people who come to see you are at, possibly all different places on that disordered eating spectrum, ranging from just kind of more restrained, not even that restricted, but it's like the slightly restrained eating, all the way to like a preclinical eating disorder, possibly, or beyond. And I think it's really important as a practitioner to suss out whether calorie talk is safe or not, whether that's going to be triggering or not. And that is something I'll ask people. I'm like, hey, do you or do you not want me to mention calories? Because for some people coming in, they are still at that calorie counting stage. They're aiming for under whatever it is. And if I have their permission, and they're like, yeah, how many calories do you think I should be eating if it's not the 1,500? And I generally use the 2,500 calories, which I got that from Nicola Rinaldi, who wrote No Period Then Now What? No Period Now What? And that's what she got from her research, is like this all-in approach of a minimum of 2,500 calories a day. But that will work with people who are just so convinced, is like, but I'm eating huge plates of food. And it's like, if they're counting calories and if they're open to a number, I'll be like, well, this is actually closer to what we're going for.
Cool. That's cool to hear.
It is, but you're right. It's very individual. Some people will be like, no, can't handle hearing about calories, in which case I'll be like, okay, let's talk about minimum spoons and cups and serving sizes and plates, and talking and finding that person who's got really healthy relationship with food. So I'm so glad that you mentioned all those other ways, because sometimes calories, this is no-go zone in terms of talking about calories. Thank you.
It is nice to hear, though, that you do sometimes bring it up, because I think I often just steer clear of it, but it's nice knowing that depending on the patient, you obviously can pick up whether you can or not. But it's cool for me to hear that you do ask the odd patient and you do just have that chat with them.
It's the odd patient. It's definitely not all of them. But for those who
of course,
they really think it's not going to be triggering for one, they count calories already and they're just switched on to how much that is, then it can be for those people. Okay, cool. So I think you've answered all my questions about food. Oh, the other last thing I wanted to ask you was, in terms of the regularity, the volume, the variety, is there any particular order you work on those with people, or is it kind of all at the same time, or whatever seems correct or most appropriate for that person? More individual approach.
Yes. I think, it again depends. Someone, if they really need to work on, they might need to work on variety. They could be at a point where they're eating regular meals. They've got their 3 main meals, at least 2 snacks, whatever it is. So it depends on what I feel the person needs to work on. if they're still just really rigid in they only eat this for breakfast, this for lunch, this for dinner. So it does depend. But if they have HA, so no periods, volume's a big one. So adding more nutrient-dense foods to their plate. And often it's complex carbs and starchy veggies. So that's often the key thing that's missing from their plate of food.
Oh my God.
So yeah, it's a huge one. So I even have people who do not have disordered eating, but they're following whatever diet and they've wiped out all their beautiful complex carbs, so all their nice whole grainy foods and starchy veggies, particularly potatoes. It's one of the worst things we can do as females for our periods.
I know. And I've got the word carbs on my notes here with a big circle scribbled around it.
Yes.
Oh my God.
They're so vital.
They're so vital. And we're living in such a carb-phobic decade or couple of decades. It's going on like over 20 years now where people have been scared of carbs. And I remember, you know, I went 10 years without eating sweet potato because a friend who was studying naturopathy at the time told me that her lecturer told her, you know, potatoes are bad, shouldn't be eating white potatoes. And from on, I know, I was like, oh, okay, can't eat white potatoes. But for nearly 10 years, over the span of my own like eating disorder. And luckily she didn't go on to develop an eating disorder, but I did. And it's just those beliefs that we pick up along the way and that we adopt from the culture and from other people, they can really be harmful. And just love it when people talk about carbs. They're so important and they're so not the villain.
Oh, 100%. I grew up, you said, like, we've been afraid of carbs for a decade or two. And I also, like, grew up during the 90s, which was this massive non-fat era. So everything had to be no fat, low fat, like everything. And I think that was definitely damaging. Obviously, someone who, like myself and yourself, who's susceptible to disordered eating, growing up in this thing where it was all about the skim milk and the no fat every product, that was really damaging. And it's similar with the carbs. It's so crazy that the beautiful, humble little sweet potato is put into this bizarre category and people are afraid to eat it. And it's like, it's not only for our hormones as females, but like massive for our digestion and our gut health. And yeah, really important.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Oh my gosh. Okay, yeah. Go carbs. I'm all about the
yes.
Because often I
embrace the potato.
Yes, please. It's because of our collective carb phobia. I often find that might be the only thing that's holding someone back from their period. Like they're eating heaps of protein. They're all about the fats, you know, keto, so sexy.
Yes.
But it's the carbs. Like, oh no, I might have brown rice once a week and like a half a cup of it. It's like,
tablespoon.
No.
Yeah.
In a gentle way, like, okay, so let's talk about that.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you for talking about all the food stuff. I've got 1,000 other questions, but I'm also aware of time, so I'm going to move on.
Oh, good.
Phoebe, what are your thoughts on reducing exercise with women with HA? Do you have any specific guidelines? And when can people start to exercise again? And can you talk to us about that?
Yeah. Again, I hate that I keep saying this, but again, it depends on the individual. So I don't have any, set, this is what all women with HA have to do, because they're all different. They're all on a different journey and they're all at different stages of recovery, whether they've started their recovery phase or they're in denial or whatever it might be. And again, hopefully they're working with a psychologist on this. So hopefully they're working with psychiatrist, psychotherapist, whoever they're seeing to help support them purely on their mental health. Hopefully they're working on the exercise. And I wouldn't necessarily say that 100% exercise has to stop. Intense exercise, yes, definitely, potentially, depending on what's going on. But we all need to move, and we were not designed to stay stagnant and still all day. So movement is beneficial for our mental health and beneficial for every system in our body. So it's finding that, depending on exactly where that individual is at, but encouraging and enjoying gentle movement. And I often term it movement instead of exercise. I feel exercise can be triggering, even just that word.
Yeah.
So just movement of their body, you know, blood flow, like moving their muscles, getting out in the sunshine. So whether it's walking their dog, going for a walk, going for a splash in the ocean, coming into summer, that's a beautiful thing to do. Like a gentle stretch class or a gentle yoga class. You know all about yoga much more than I do. So yeah, I feel about it. It's not making sure that they're sitting down all day and not moving their bodies, but it's about educating them on gentle movement, then listening to their body, and kind of a combination of, yes, definitely kind of, if they need to, if they do intense exercise, reducing the intensity of their exercise, and then also incorporating rest days into their week. So kind of combination of reducing intensity if they need to, and having rest days. And again, a rest day doesn't mean that they have to sit all day, but it's just making sure they're getting blood flow on their rest days. You know, going for a walk, but not building up a sweat. You know, not getting breathless on that walk and making sure they go up every hill possible. Just going for a gentle walk.
Yeah, I really appreciate how you rephrase exercise as movement, of moving blood, getting oxygenated, getting the chi moving, if you want to speak those terms. Just that's a really nice reframe, I think, and at the same time probably reducing or minimizing that high intensity. So if someone's coming to me and doing like 6 HIIT classes a week or CrossFit almost every day of the week, and you know, maybe an Ashtanga class or 4 on top of that, that's when it's like, okay, well, yeah, let's dial it down, because that's going to be preventing you from getting your period back. And the other thing that you spoke about was the importance of rest, which I think is so understated and yet so crucial.
Yeah, it's a must.
Okay, so we've spoken about food, we've spoken about movement, we've spoken a bit about rest. I'm wondering, you know, these are these really practical, grabbable things that people can do, but then we've still got this diet mentality, right? That so many people, we're all in it. We're all affected at least a little bit by it. Even those of us who've been working at this bloody thing for years, it's so. I'm just wondering, what tips do you have for people to deal with that diet mentality, that those tentacles of diet culture just kind of has wrapped around most of us, and to transform their thinking in order to make those practical changes more doable and less anxiety provoking? How possible to do that?
I love that question, and it's a huge one, and as practitioners we're faced with it on a regular basis, as you said, and again here a big thing to actually help transform their thinking and to help rewire their brain, because we can totally do that. It's seeing aside getting professional psychological support. So that's a big one, with helping transform their thinking and helping them get stronger. So when diet culture and stuff does pop up, that they're trained, you know, they kind of can deal with that. You know, there was a huge part of me when I first started seeing my psychologist that I didn't want anyone to know. I was not ashamed of it, but I was just not in a good place. But I'll, of course, scream it from the rooftops now that I saw a psychologist for over 2 years, and it absolutely changed my life. It was one of the best things I've ever done, maybe the best. Marrying my husband was pretty high up there, just in case he's listening. But that was pivotal in me transforming my thinking around food, body image, exercise, etc. And my studies helped. I feel really lucky that I've done my naturopathy studies as well, so I kind of have that as well. And there's numerous psychologists out there. There's stacks of psychologists that specialize in eating disorders as well. So that's that. And then another big one is social media. That is huge. So kind of what pops up in I think most people listening, that's how you and I connected, Casey. It was social media. So it's massive.
Yeah.
And what's popping up in your feed every day, especially can be Instagram, because that's purely just images, that's what you're seeing, can kind of help or hinder you. That can be very triggering. So a big one is kind of doing a massive cleanse of what's popping up in your feed. And if you can acknowledge that if anything that you're seeing is damaging, if it's making you feel bad about yourself, if you're finding you're in this little rabbit hole of scrolling and comparing yourself to others, unfollow them. It's a simple unfollow, and then it stops showing up in your feed.
Very true.
And then there are a ton like you and I and so many other amazing people and practitioners out there who are body positive and body neutral and healthy at every size. And you know, once you start following a couple, you start following other ones as well. So there's a whole world of body positive accounts on social media, and it's amazing. But there's a stack of accounts that aren't so body positive. So that's a big one. And I suppose surrounding yourself with your most beautiful and supportive people. That's big. So if you know that there are certain people that are triggering for you, you might love them to death, but they can still be triggering for you. And the social media accounts, being able to acknowledge that they might be triggering and to know that it's okay to keep them at arm's length. Yeah. Which I know it's so hard, but really thinking if there is anyone in your life who is triggering for you. It might be with what they eat. It might be their relationship with food and exercise. It might be the simple language they use around food and their bodies. And that can really help you on your recovery journey, or it can kind of be a big block as well. So yeah, to know that it's okay to kind of put a little temporary or potentially permanent barrier up for a while to kind of help protect yourself while you're going through recovery.
Absolutely. All of that stuff is so important. I love that you mentioned the social media cleanse. It's the only time I love using the word cleanse.
Same. I never use that word. Felt weird coming out of my mouth, actually.
Yeah, no, it's like, oh no, it's okay. It's a social media cleanse.
Yes.
Beautiful, beautiful suggestions. Thank you for that, Phoebe. Those are all gold. Phoebe, I'm wondering if we could do a little bit of myth busting as
Hit me.
Yeah, okay, cool. So, common myths I hear. First one, you only lose your period once you get really thin.
False. My humble opinion. Obviously, good. Obviously, that can be a particular situation. If there is a particular type of eating disorder involved, major stress as well can cause someone to lose a heap of weight, lose their periods as well. You know, low weight can be involved, but not all women who have HA, it doesn't have to do with body weight at all. Yes. They could still be over-exercising and undernourishing their bodies. Maybe not necessarily lose whatever kilos on the scale, but they can still get HA because they're not functioning properly. And there can be a bunch of other stuff. I mentioned thyroid before. There can be other reasons why a woman has lost her period, for sure. Even just cutting out potatoes, as we were talking about before. Cutting out complex carbs and starchy veggies. Yep. That can do it.
That did it for me. I lost my period for nearly a year. I was also training for crazy half Ironman triathlon and all the other disordered stuff on top of that. So yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes not. Okay, yeah, great answer. So people of any size can have hypothalamic amenorrhea. Thank you. Beautiful.
Definitely.
Thank you. Okay, next myth. Now that I have my period back, I can stop working at this. So this
short answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Short answer is you have to fully recover. But the end. When I initially started seeing my psychologist, which probably sounds familiar for a lot of beautiful girls going through this, but I wanted the best of both worlds. I wanted to get rid of my eating disorder. I didn't want that anymore. I wanted to remove my anxiety, my low mood, and I wanted to get my period back because I had been gone for a couple of years, and I acknowledged that wasn't a good thing. But I didn't want to have to gain any weight. I didn't want anything to change. I just wanted to get my period back and get rid of the eating disorder. And I quickly realized that was impossible. And in a sense, I wanted partial recovery. I kind of didn't want to fully do it and, have a totally flexible relationship with food and body image, and, weight came into it as well. But I knew that I wanted to get out of this space. So it didn't take me long to realize that partial recovery just doesn't quite do it. I wanted to get out of that dark place forever. I didn't want to go back to that. So deep down, I knew that I couldn't just half do it. So full recovery, like my period kicked in. I saw my psychologist for just over 2 years. And my period kicked in quite quickly. That was just for me. Everyone's different. But my period kicked in quite quickly within the first year. And I saw my psych for over 2 years. So there was still, just because I got my period back, there was so much work to be done to get me to that full recovery, which is really vital to also, so you can live a so much more fulfilling life, but to also prevent relapsing and going back into those ways. So yeah, my last session, my psychologist and I kind of both felt that I had reached full recovery. I'd completed all my food and exercise challenges. My psychologist felt there wasn't really much we could work on together. But one of the biggest things that really signaled for me that I was fully recovered was how insignificant weighing myself had become. Because as part of my psychology sessions, I was always weighed. That was part of the deal. And the last however many sessions, I honestly, like jumping on those scales every session, I honestly didn't feel anything. And that was massive. I didn't think I was able to ever get to that point. My psychologist would say, oh, I've had patients that, don't care about their weight. And I just thought, as if, that's never going to happen to me. But it was the most amazing thing that jumping on those scales didn't affect what I ate the next day. It didn't affect my mood. It was jumping on, cool, let's, get on with all the good stuff.
With life. I mean, to someone who's never experienced disordered eating, so like hardly anyone, I guess, but for someone who has never had food or body image issues, that might sound a bit weird, like, oh God, what do you mean getting on? But like, I'm listening to you going, wow, that's a massive thing. That's enormous.
Yeah, it's huge.
Significant. So what a testament to the work that you did. And really good answer as well. That really gave, I think, the listeners an idea of what one version of recovered can look like, just really not being attached to that scale anymore. It's such a big
and
thing.
Fully recovered is so much better on every single level than partially recovered.
Life is so much better.
And we only live once. That's it.
That's right. Exactly. Okay, so I think I have one or two more little myths for you to bust.
Sure.
This next one might be a little bit stickier, but I'll give you a go anyway. So,
Sure.
But I've still got my period. It's just getting a little wacky. So I don't need to worry about eating more or anything yet.
So like irregular periods.
Yes. So this is what someone might say to me, when it's getting irregular or the cycle's getting longer and longer, or even sometimes shorter. And to me, that's kind of starting to look like an anovulatory cycle. But is often that early sign that fertility is starting to suffer and it could progress to HA. So this oligomenorrhea, that irregular kind of place where periods start to get a bit wacky. I know it's a bit of a tricky question, because often people will come to see you when they've just been flat out missing a period for a few months. But I see a lot of women who they have an eating disorder, but they'll still have their period, and as a result they'll be like, well, I can't be that sick because I've still got my period, even if it is kind of a long cycle or it's a bit wacky. What would you say to those people?
I'd say so. Irregular periods as well is a super intelligent sign from the body that there's something going on. So kind of an irregular period, inverted commas, is classified between anything outside of 21 to 35 days. So less than 21 is a short cycle. Over 35 days is classified as a long cycle. So either side can be seen as irregular. So it's super smart. It's your body your body's not quite keeping up with ovulation and a regular menstrual cycle. So whether it is the beginning of hypothalamic amenorrhea or, potentially coupled with disordered eating, over-exercising, that kind of stuff. Or it could be something else, not even on the HA disordered eating way of thinking. There's a condition called PCOS, which is very common to have irregular periods. It's a big one. Could be linked to an underactive thyroid. Could be if someone's gone, like, all of a sudden really changed their diet, so they've gone vegan or vegetarian or like very, very plant-based. No issues with that. But there's, we get like a lot of our iron and zinc and B vitamins and vitamin A, etc., from meat sources, which is vital for hormonal health. So if that's happened and they notice a change in their periods, it could be they might need some supplementation. If they've just come off the pill, that's another one that can create irregular periods for a while. Low carb diet, the potatoes again, the complex carbohydrates. So it's, oligomenorrhea, I suppose, is a sign that there's something going on. May not be HA, may not be disordered eating, it might be. But if I come across that in the consultation, that needs more attention and questioning as to why their periods are outside that roughly 21 to 35 days.
Yeah, fantastic. Great answer. I agree 100%. It is not as alarming a flag, maybe, although sometimes it kind of is, depending on the situation and the person. But when I've got women saying to me like, I've still got my period, so, it's all good. It's like, well, what's your period doing? Let's look at that, because that's important as well. That window that you mentioned, if it's shorter than 21, longer than 35 days, we want to start asking why. And if ovulation is even happening or not. Okay, because you can have a period without ovulating.
Which is
something I didn't know
itself.
Exactly. Okay, all right, cool. So I think I'm gonna start to pull these strings together, and let's just say, my last kind of theoretical question for you, Phoebe, let's just say that someone has recovered from HA, they have recovered mentally as well as physically, and maybe they want to have kids now, or they've already had a child or two or whatever, and they're still living in diet culture. How can we prevent relapsing once someone has done all that hard work, because it is just such a minefield that we live in at the moment. How can we keep those long-term benefits of being well nourished and keep that intuitive eating or non-diet or whatever approach that you use alive as well, even once everything's happy?
Yes, that's a great question. And again, there's so many potential things. And I think it links into a lot of what I was saying before. So being solid with who you're surrounding yourself with, having people that make you feel all warm and fuzzy inside, and there's no triggering people in your close circle. Social media is a big one. And kind of just, hopefully, again, they've seen a psychologist, psychiatrist, they've had mental health support, so they can hopefully be able to pull back on all the strategies and things they learned through dealing with that. I wrote down, I went through notebooks and notebooks and notebooks when I was seeing my psychologist, and I compiled it all. This is classic personality of mine, but I compiled it all into, because I wrote down all the things that helped me, like little strategies, ways to think. If this pops up, do this. And I've got a little book that I'll probably have forever that just summarizes everything I went, like all the helpful strategies I went through with my psych. And just being really solid on knowing what works for you in terms of food and exercise and balance of all other things, you know, work and play and sunshine and all that good stuff. But I think the big one of preventing relapse is just knowing that no matter who's around you or what you're going through or what change is coming up, you know, I know I've recently moved house, and I know big changes can kind of bring back that voice in my head, and kind of being just always diligent on your food and exercise, always incorporating those rest days every single week, always eating like whatever food has worked for that person, just knowing that that's, no matter what new fad diet is coming out, or no matter what they read on social media about X food or whatever, it's kind of a lot of it is mental strength, especially if it's a vulnerable time. COVID's been a huge one. You know, I read that there was a lot more calls with people struggling with eating disorders, and you know, change is massive. So being extra diligent with your food and exercise challenges around those times. And it sounds corny, but just being true to you and knowing what you've been through, you know, what works best, you know, what got you to recovery, full recovery, and just having it's a lot of it is that mental strength, determination, motivation, especially with having kids, which I don't yet, but hopefully one day. That's a big motivator, to be a bloody awesome role model for your kids. You know, if I have kids that grow up and they don't bat an eyelid when the word weight or fat or food or body comes up, I just want them to, I don't want it to be a thing. And I know that's a big challenge in this society, but that's a huge motivator as a mom or a dad that's been through an eating disorder, to be an awesome role model for your kiddies.
100%. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with you on that one. All right, this is my second last question. I'm going to start. I promise I will finish on time.
No, you're good. I'm loving it.
I'm currently studying the naturopathy degree at the moment, and I don't know if you. Yeah, I know, it's exciting. Well, some of it's great, and some of it is just like, but you know.
Yeah.
But the herbal medicine stuff I really love. But I'm just wondering if you found that during your education, your naturopathy studies, was there much training or awareness around eating disorders? Because as you and I both know, that's such a prevalent issue in our society. I mean, I think it was a 2008 study showed that between 50 and 75% of women have some form of disordered eating. It's huge.
It's massive.
And it's just my experience that so far in the degree, I'm about 3/4 of the way through it, that so far there hasn't been a lot of education on disordered eating, which I think is so problematic, because often clients, I mean, people who I'm seeing, maybe previously they have been to see naturopaths and natural health practitioners, kind of knowing that they will be affirmed in some of the disordered beliefs they already had around food and exercise. And it kind of is one of the big reasons I'm studying naturopathy. I kind of want to do what you're doing and be that person that these folks are coming to, because they're into the natural health side of things, but also be switched on to like, okay, there's some red flags in the disorder. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that. If you found, was your experience similar or was it totally different? What do you reckon with that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you'll get to it, but like we touched on it in my studies. Like it was very brief. It might have been an hour or two, and that was it. And there are so many naturopaths and people in the health world that do practice like us, which is amazing. In how they educate their patients and everything, which is great. But I do think, I suppose there are a lot of also health professionals, not just naturopaths, but yes, naturopaths as well.
Dietitians, doctors, everyone.
Yes. Yeah. That aren't, it's an awareness thing, but aren't trained about it. And certain language used around food and ways of eating, and you know, I don't even like saying the word diet, but diets and things like that, exercise, all that kind of stuff that can be promoted can be highly, highly triggering for someone with an ED or disordered eating, even a history of disordered eating. And even something as simple as getting a patient to cut out a particular food group, which depending on my patient going on, like it sometimes it totally can help. But if I'm dealing with a disordered eater, cutting out a food group is the last thing I'm going to do, because that in itself can be very triggering. And there can be practice, naturopaths or not, that can be more extreme and strict when they're talking about ways of eating. And again, that can be super triggering. I remember actually in college in my final year, we were doing like case studies, and one of them was an HA case study. And obviously my ears pricked up and I was like, oh. And the class, we're all just discussing the case, and it's, you know, given female, age this, you're given a brief case study on it. HA, how do you treat this person? You know, what tests would you run? What foods would you do? What herbs would you use? Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, nothing was mentioned about disordered eating, just kind of HA, but it kind of went through the lifestyle, and this was the diet. And I was sitting in there like, hello, like this is so obvious. This beautiful case study we need to work on a diet. But the class was chatting about different herbs and, okay, we can run this test and this test, and kind of put up my hand. And I was like, it was a made up case study. It wasn't like a real person in the clinic. I was like, doesn't she have like disordered eating? Like, isn't that what's causing her HA? Like, she doesn't need any herbs. Yeah, it was kind of a bit of an aha moment that firstly I realized, like, oh my goodness, I want to work with these people. But yeah, it kind of opened up their eyes, like, oh, I hadn't thought of that being a possibility. So yeah, what definitely wasn't big in college. And I think I've heard of some patients come in and they've tried naturopathy in the past and been given a particular herbal mixture to try kickstart their periods, and that's not what they need. You know, we need to restore her eating and her nourishment and getting her back to where her body functions at its best. So yeah, not all practitioners would necessarily, we all work differently, but I'm not saying they're totally uneducated, but I'd love to see more awareness, and just, I think, awareness of a disordered eater. And if that's not what the practice is comfortable in working with, then being able to refer, because there's definitely a particular way of talking to them and working with them so they can regain their periods, which is what they want, but being able to work, kind of in their line of thinking. And it's really diet and exercise. If we really simplify it.
Yeah, that's it. When you distill it, that should be the focus. And yeah, agree with everything you just said. And you just reminded me of when I was, I think, 8 months or maybe 9 months into my HA, and you know, of course, very interested in natural health. And I went to the student clinic at the college that I'm currently at, and you know, it's like, no period, what's going on? And it was exactly what you said. It was like, okay, well, here's some herbs. I think they gave me Videx and some false
Vitex.
And you know what? I did get my period back a few weeks later, but I was nowhere near fully recovered. Nowhere near. It took, just as it was with you, many more years of counselling and working and being you know, okay with eating more and working on that diet mentality that was so ingrained in my brain before I was fully recovered. And I think that's problematic. That's problematic. And as you said, not all naturopaths, not all practices, of course. But I think it's something to watch out for, because I see this still happening sometimes, not heaps, but definitely still happening, and something I'd love to see change.
Yeah, same.
Profession.
Yeah. Okay. And as you said, just like using herbs, or Vitex or something, I kind of see that like as feeding like like, no pun intended, but feeding the disorder. Like,
100%.
oh, cool, I've got my period now and I haven't actually had to work on
Exactly.
this thing I've got running in the background.
Yeah.
It's, kind of tried to kickstart your body into gear. You've had a period, but that's feeding your anxiety, and it's feeding the eating disorder, because the eating disorder's got away with not being worked on.
Yeah, exactly. It kind of gives that message of like, your eating's fine, keep restricting, or keep doing what you're doing. And it's not just naturopaths. I mean, heaps of people I've spoken to have gone to doctors who have been told, nah, diet and exercise won't do anything. Here's some Clomid, or maybe it's time for injectables. And it's just like,
I know.
Drives me crazy. So anyway, eating disorder awareness. Last question, Phoebe. This thing that you do on your social media, Instagram account, that I really love is sending love notes to body parts. So, for example, the dear bum, thank you, or thank you thighs for all the wonderful things you do and all the hard work that you do. I love that you do that. That body appreciation, body acceptance, even. What was behind that, or like what gave that impetus to post about being appreciative of some of these body parts that people find sometimes very difficult to
Yeah, I actually thought about that post. I was having a shower one night and I looked in the mirror, and for a split second my brain went into this like, then I was like, no, Phoebe, like, pull it back. We love your bum. Thank you, bum. So I was like, I'm going to post about that. But I suppose the message actually stemmed from one of the numerous strategies that I worked on with my psychologist. And it's all about body appreciation and not necessarily having to love every single body part every single day, because that's not realistic. I get that. But being able to appreciate and acknowledge how bloody amazing our bodies are and what they do for us every single day, and without, all those self-scrutinized parts of our body, we don't function properly. And I think everyone, disordered or not, I think we all know what it feels like to fall into that pattern of picking out body parts, whatever it might be. Often we go back to the same one and speaking so horribly to them with no appreciation, and just seeing aesthetics and actually, or wanting to change parts of it in some way, and always wanting something different or something better, right? So instead of being so quick to criticize, it's easy to catch yourself in the moment and then instead turn it around and actually thank that body part for what it does for you. Dear bum was like, that our bums, I can't imagine, number one, our digestive system would be in a complete mess. You couldn't sit, you couldn't walk, you can't do anything. So to actually just pause and think, what does that body part allow you to do and achieve? You'd look totally bizarre without a bum. We need it. And without it, you can't function at your best. You can't. Any body part we need. So each time you catch yourself speaking so negatively about that body part, the posts are about, instead thank it for what it does for you, and then move on. Go do something way better with your day than thinking about a body part.
I'm just trying not to laugh. It's so obvious. Like, yeah, we really do need those body parts. Why are we
totally
time being so mean and critical of ourselves when actually we could just be like, thanks, bum, I love you, and then, or not even I love you, just like, thank you for doing all the stuff.
Yes, I see you. You're great.
And then moving on with all the other cool shit that you want to do with your day.
Totally. So yeah, it's kind of their post about body appreciation and acknowledgement.
Yeah.
And if you can give that body some love, as body part some love, even better. But I get the body love doesn't always happen all the time.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you, Phoebe. This has been an amazing conversation. I've really held myself back from just exploding into all these, running down all these other rabbit holes.
Same. I could keep going on and on.
Thank you so much for chatting with me today. And I'm just wondering, can you let the listeners know if there's anything that you're currently working on that you want people to know about and where they can find you.
Yes. So my name's Phoebe Jobson, if you've forgotten. I work in Sydney, but often online, as we all seem to be as well. So my business is called Nutmeg Naturopathy. So I've got an office in Mossman in Sydney, but also online as well. And yeah, I suppose I've got a few exciting things in store for next year. Especially this year with COVID, I've started really, I'm a speaker as well, so I've started really revving up my speaking gigs too. So I've done a bunch of webinars for different corporates this year, kind of like a lunch and learn session. And I did one kind of on this topic, which was so awesome, with a bunch of women at Amazon. Actually, that was amazing to be able to actually speak about this topic, which was really cool. And kind of a big long-term goal, and I'll get there one day, I'd love to speak in schools. I'd love to, especially girls' schools, guys as well, but girls obviously have the HA as well, so kind of speak about the importance of their periods. But I'd love to get up and talk to these girls who are at this very vulnerable stage, and sometimes it's that period where they could either swing into fad dieting and disordered eating, or hopefully not, kind of getting it where they're old enough to sit and understand what you're saying, but young enough too to hopefully sometimes change their way of thinking. So yeah, I'd love to speak in schools. So that's my little goal for 2021.
Oh, that'll be so epic. Yeah, I'll be cheering you right on. It's so needed, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. I would have loved that when I was going through school.
I know, right? Me too. If only how different things could have been, but at the same time, our journeys are our journeys, and here we are, and now
exactly
you're fired up to help other people. So
I'm so fired up, and I can see that you are too. It's just so nice.
All right, well, Phoebe, I will let you get on with your day. Thank you so much for chatting with me today and enlightening the listeners on all things HA.
Thanks for having me. I've loved it.
Thank you for being here and for straddling the tricky edges of yoga land and diet culture with me. I hope this podcast encourages you to compassionately and continuously question the ways that contemporary yoga is unfolding and interacting with other big forces in the world, to develop a discerning mind and open heart, and to skillfully dodge the diet BS that often comes along with studio culture. Like you, I'm eager to keep learning and sharing, and I put all relevant links in the show notes. You can find my blog, online nutrition counselling services, and lots more at funkyforest.com.au. While you're there, make sure to download my free ebook, A Modern Yogi's BS-Free Guide to Wellbeing. It's a light-hearted, easy read with my top 6 tips on dodging diet culture crap in the yoga world, whilst creating sustainable and balanced health from the inside out. If you love the podcast, please consider supporting my work at patreon.com/non-dietyogi. There are some pretty rad rewards there, such as exclusive content, discount codes, giveaways, and the ability to chat with me. As more episodes roll out, I'll be adding even more fun bonuses, such as my non-diet yogi cookbook and mini courses. You can access most of the goodies at the lowest level, which is just $2 US a month, or around $2.90 Australian dollars. Like most mamas, I'm ridiculously busy parenting, working, studying, and all the rest. I've recorded a bunch of episodes, and some of these have required 5 separate takes just to get a whole episode done, as I need to wake up before my little ones to do it, and they get up very early. So I'm crossing my fingers that the Patreon will give me the financial capacity to keep doing this. Another way to support is to head over to iTunes and subscribe and review the podcast. That would be so awesome. Thank you. The in and outro song is Evening Glow by John Anderson. Thank you so much for being here. Until next time.